Are you ready to start shuffling? What a week this is. I have to talk about the election today. I just have to. It's going on, and it's what's going on for all of us. And I mentioned earlier that with it comes a lot of anxiety. I think that's something that a lot of us are experiencing right now. So it's going to be a fun topic to hone in on, or just any and all of the feelings that come up here around this pretty large event. It's a pretty large event, the election. We're coming up on that. I want to talk a lot about intention setting for readings looking at on certain events in the future in general. In terms of being a tarot card reader, that's one that comes up a lot. That's a question that you'll encounter a lot yourself asking, or other people coming to you for readings. It's kind of alongside the what's going to happen kind of question. And it's I've talked earlier on the shuffle that it's a tricky kind of question, and it's not exactly the most effective one to ask in trying to develop, the insight, perspective you want to get out of a tarot card reading, the direction, the guidance that you want to get out of a reading. So a lot of the work that you do as a reader for yourself and for other people is reframing questions, clarifying questions, and distilling their intention to really fuel your readings and start them in the correct direction. So I've talked about intention setting on the shuffle before. Now I want to talk about it with a really special focus and slant toward this type of question. What will happen about this certain event? In this case, we're all wondering the election. Before I dive all the way into that, I want to remind you that you can ask questions at any point. I'm looking at the chat. And the intention of this stream for me is to create sort of a space where we have a class for tarot. So, it's a small group class here. Go ahead, fire off those questions. I'm here to answer them. That's the intention of my time here. Also, of course, you can call in and get a reading. And I'm welcome to invite that at any time. It's a really, really cool way to add a lot to the lesson that we can offer, and watching readings is the best way to learn them, for sure. So if you're willing to dive in on stream, let's do it. Let's create that. What's going to happen with this election? Wouldn't we like to know? Whenever I get to a question like that, it's a lot of questions you can just kind of ask, why do you want to know? And that'll point you towards some of the more important aspects that will kind of give us direction in the reading, like what are you trying to achieve, what's important to you, what are you attached to, what are you hoping for or fearing in the outcome. There's this kind of question helps clarify more where our current thoughts and feelings are kind of centered, so that we can reach out with an intention or a reading to have it bring back a message that's focused on that. So at the beginning of a reading, these handful of questions to get it set are really important to give us direction and get set before we start really flipping cards and interpreting them. So I'm worried about the results of the election. I'm asking what will happen. As tarot reader, I am responding right away. What are you hoping to happen, and why is it important to you? And in the case of the election, the answers to these questions may be obvious with whoever you're speaking with. And in certain instances like that, maybe we can just move past it, and I can skip ahead to a later question. It's all depending on the context of the situation is going to change the flow and rhythm and the exact procedure that you carry out and offer a tarot card reading. So to remember that this is all guidelines, but not the rote, method, flowchart way to do a reading. I don't necessarily like to think that it, I want to lock into a rigid structure like that, but there are some larger guiding principles that I suppose I could illustrate in a sort of gentle flowchart. And I guess that's what I'm trying to share here then. In any case, why is it important? And of course, in the case of the election, because there's a lot at stake here, and it's pretty huge. There's a lot of answers to that question, and for the purposes of this stream, I don't know that I'm going to dive so deep into all of them right now. I'd rather turn my focus on, you're hoping for a certain outcome. And this is an interesting case with the election, and it really highlights a challenging place to dive into a tarot reading with. And that is when we're facing an event with uncertain results that we have little control over. Thank you, Christathis, for providing the best reason to why do you care? Your answer: because I want there to be another election someday. Perfect summary. Wow, thanks for that. Oh, where was I? Right. When you're trying to no, I really lost it. That was so funny. It really threw me all the way over here. I'm just still stuck on that joke. Always witty, Christathis, always witty. In any case, why does it matter is obvious in this case, and the interesting thing about the election is that it's an example of a case where we don't have a lot of control over the results. We all, of course, had our vote and cast that. Thank you, Chris, for being here for me. I needed it. And so we cast our ballot, and that's about the extent of control that we have, most of us, unless you want to devote a lot of your time and energy towards, volunteering, campaigning, and donating, and all of this. There are, of course, more ways that you could add power and influence, in certain directions that you wanted. But for many of us, the largest part of the influence that we exerted was our vote. And at this point, watching the results stream in, there is nothing left to do but just find out what happens. And that is a place, number one reason people and we ever want tarot card readings, is because there's something uncertain, something that we don't know what's going to happen, and we're worried about it, right? So this is just the paramount example. And when you're in that state, I'm not sure what's going to happen, and there's little or nothing to do about it, can be challenging. And this is why a lot of times I ask the question, what do you want out of a reading? Or, what are you, sometimes the question, what are you trying to achieve, might highlight in the response an indication that, oh, you're really looking for action to take, to do something about this. Or, oh, maybe you're just looking for a different mindset to employ to help you, just be okay with this. And, oh, maybe you're just really uncertain of how to explain the situation you're in, and you just need it clarified and organized for you. Like this, indication of what the person is needing will become clear to you as you go through the reading. But these questions, you really have to be listening to these answers. There's a lot of deep listening as a part of practicing tarot, and any conversation in any interpersonal practice. A lot of listening is very important, and of course here I am on stream, and I'm doing just like all of the speaking and just a little bit of listening in the chat, and then a little more if I get someone to call in. But in the more common context that you're doing a reading, if you're speaking with someone else, it's important that you really ask these pointed and really intentional questions that are guiding us to the questions that are really going to bring what we want forth from the reading. And if you're doing that process for yourself, it's kind of another ball game. Now you've got to really be checking, am I giving myself time to ask myself these questions and really listen to what the answer is that emerges from me, and be open enough to see that that's what I'm feeling. Sometimes could be a challenge or a roadblock that you'd hit, and coming to clarifying and really grabbing that greatest question and intention that you're trying to craft here as you set yourself up to draw some cards. Let's say we're further along there, and I'm in a place where I am itching to act. I'm itching to just be able to do something. And a lot of times when, we're in this place with something that we can't do anything about, the reading's going to become more of a conversation about how we identify what actions we can take right now that absolutely best guide and direct us toward what we're trying to achieve in the situation. If I, wanted to believe that there was some butterfly wing effect that would put Biden in office, and I could do something really weird like that right now, I'd want to know. And, so Hail Mary, draw that card. Even in a situation where I know there's absolutely very little to nothing I can do, I just explained logically in our example here with the election that that's the case, I might still draw that card for someone if they really wanted it. Because we recognize that there's little to do, and to have that summed up and illustrated as the path toward your higher goals can be the message we need for a moment to be at peace with doing little to nothing. Just to recognize that that's really maybe all that's called for, all that, that gets you the furthest in this case. But even if we're in a situation where we're recognizing that, and that's kind of the message I want to tell you, I'm still going to draw a card for it because it's something that's important, and we're trying to follow where our thoughts and feelings are in the reading and, illustrate and address those with the cards. So there are no thoughts or feelings that are irrelevant, or, if there's something that you think is illogical, you still put it on the table because you're experiencing it. And if you're going to block out part of your experience, you're going to block out part of the answer. And so, I draw that card and have that conversation. And the card drawn, the specific one, will probably deliver the message in a way that it is able to be received, kind of let us be that in that timely manner, hearing exactly what we need in that moment to move closer to accepting the reality that we can't do anything more at this point. And that's kind of what I'd expect to see come from the card after being flipped over, is more how, in your, or in our own, if you're reading for yourself, in my own, and, individual experience, this card describes how I come to really being at peace with how little I can do in the situation if I'm driven and really want to take action. And then that becomes a really powerful medicine, that card, in a reading. And that's, I think, more the purpose of the reading here, is that, we're taking, okay, I have the uncertain event and it brings up a lot of feelings. One of them is this wishing to do things about it. Here's how we can resolve and be at peace with and release that. The other is I am anxious about what's going to happen, and what if it went wrong? And anxiety, I need to talk about anxiety for a moment. Because anxiety is one of the big ones to approach. And of course, so many of us, experiencing varying levels and a lot of times a lot of anxiety. It's one that you'll frequently encounter when you're doing tarot readings. And a lot of times when you're approaching a feeling and wondering how to employ or manage it, it's important to think about, what does this feeling indicate to me? What's its message? What is it really indicating to me that's triggering the feeling to happen? And is the feeling giving me some impetus, some feeling of something I want to do? Is it driving some sort of impulse, or is it not? Is it making me shut down and do nothing? How does it look when I view this in my head, and I try to consider it rationally? Is that different than the feeling anymore? These are the sorts of questions that we might be considering as we're going into a tarot reading, and those answers are probably some of the things that are coming up on the card flipped up. But anxiety is a tough one, because it usually indicates that we're worried about preparation that needs to be made for future events, or it's this worry that future events will go a certain way. And I want to exert some sort of control on it. I've some stake in how it resolves, and I more or less want to be the one who shapes it, depending on who I am. And when I'm not sure exactly what I need and how much I need to do, that might make me anxious, because now, anxiety is just when there's something that you have to keep thinking about so much that you're worried about, and you just do it, compulsively and over again, because it's the kind of question that doesn't have an answer, and what can I do about, the election right now? What can I do? What can I do? Has no answer. The answer is this really unsatisfying. There is no action to take. So, when we're approaching it in the tarot card reading, we're engaging that feeling. I've already talked about that one a little bit. That anxious impulse. A lot of times anxiety can be soothed by illustrating clear action to take that does address the issues that you're anxious about. Sometimes that can be really helpful and something to bring forward in a reading when you're handling a case of anxiety. But if anyone said to me that they were feeling anxious, I'd want to probe a little deeper, I think, because that word can be a little loaded and can mean slightly different things to different people. So if, I'm talking about anxiety pretty generally here and just trying to address it because it'll come up a lot, but I should actually talk a little bit about how I might approach the question of help me, I'm anxious in a tarot card reading. Because I kind of have to ask, what do you want to do about or with this anxiety? Is it something you're trying to achieve? And we're having a reading where we're determining the action you take and kind of clarifying the elements at play in your life so that it's easy to see and it's mapped out. And instead of spinning your tires in the mud trying to figure it all out, we just lay it out crystal clear in a reading here with the cards on the table. And your mind can be at ease because you've seen the whole picture and you've got it, I've got it figured out now. That anxious need to understand everything at play and be sure I'm not missing anything can be satisfied in a tarot card reading where we can say, okay, let's draw cards with the intention to cover comprehensively what you need to do so that you can be at rest and at peace, knowing you're doing your absolute best. And, so that's a lot of what I try to draw in a reading, especially when I'm facing anxiety. But when I'm asking for clarification on anxiety, it's yes, is there something that you want to do about it? That's one question. Or is it, this a lot of times we'd be in a place where we recognize I can't do anything about it and I want to get over my anxiety in a way, it's just like it's been burdening me and I just keep worrying about it and it's really, really hard. I'm stuck in the feeling. And then the reading, takes a totally different turn where I'm going to look at, okay, well, what is making us hold on to that feeling? Why are you attached to being anxious? What does your anxiety accomplish that you value, in terms of keeping you prepared, keeping you a step ahead, keeping you intelligent and privy to all of those things that other people may miss? It's always a question, why? Why are you anxious? Because it's going to produce really, really different answers. So I think that's probably one of the big takeaways I'd drop here just for the tarot readings in general is clarify, clarify, clarify. You have to clarify all the time. You start always from a kind of amorphous, what do you want this reading to be about? And, it's this, well, I'm wondering what's happening in, my relationship or whatever. And if we're not clarifying it and really getting some specific direction for that relationship, it's just not going to be as powerful a reading. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to now go ahead and I want to address the issue of anxiety, but I want to do it with all of us here, this particular group, because I haven't done our card pull today. Those of you that have been watching the shuffle probably know my rhythm here, that I like to draw a card for all of us, a reading for all of us that are here. This is kind of our special sacred moment. And while we're here considering anxiety and how to cope with it, especially in the context of this election, I want these cards drawn to be very clearly where our focus goes to make sure that, we are easing ourselves of our anxiety as much as we can. Just a place for us to hold our minds that is calming so that we know if I'm spinning out, I can kind of put my mind in this gear and that'll help me get out of the mud a little bit, right? I'm going to answer the what do I do about it question because we just talked about how great it is to answer that in any case, regardless of the situation. So we're going to grab that. And then I'm going to grab one more because this one's going to kind of illustrate the elements at play, kind of just where we are now. Kind of want one to just describe the setting of what's present in our lives that's really relevant to this election and our relationship with this election and kind of processing our feelings and reactions to it. What in our lives are relevant to that part of the story. Bring that forward. Know that that's highlighted and that's important and probably what I'll be addressing and interacting with my mindset and the action I take. You might notice that this is essentially a ready, set, go. My get ready, mindset, action. And which is 3 points I think that are always good to cover when you're considering one thing. I'm going to pull out a tarot card deck because I want the cards that we draw for ourselves to be drawn with this playing card deck, but with a little more ceremony, I'm going to find them in this tarot card deck so that we can see it in its full glory as we consider it in the reading together. The playing card deck that I'm drawing from is one that my mom got me as a gift a very long time ago. Thank you, Mom. They are JFK cards, and I couldn't think of a more appropriate deck from my collection to pull out today than this one. Just dreaming. Got my JFK cards, and I'm just dreaming over here. Let's see. Let's bring us back to the moment then. Because we're all joined together in this moment. And this moment's the special one that receives this message. What we need to be ready for. Managing our feelings for the election. And I'm just taking that deep breath and kind of setting myself and meditating for a moment to clear my mind so that I make space for whatever feelings or thoughts that will come and to not be blocked, clouded by anything else. That's a headspace to interpret a card from. Love me a 5 of diamonds. This is a pretty card to plainly illustrate the case of doing nothing. 5 of diamonds is all about this case where all the action is happening in a place that you can't access, that's outside of you. You are excluded from the action, and it's a time where you have nothing left to do but wait because there's nothing else being offered you. Did I really just go through the whole deck and not find the 5 of Pentacles? That's funny. In any case, that's something to be ready for, obviously. We all knew that. There it is. It's right at the bottom. 5 of Pentacles in this deck. This deck has these little forest creatures. And the 5 of Pentacles usually depicts, and I'll go into the card for a moment. We have a moment to do a flash definition. The 5 of Pentacles shows these 2 people outside the church. The church is supposed to be the only, full, warm, and welcoming parish that you can always come to, right? These people are the lepers that aren't even allowed in there. It's trying kind of to illustrate this situation where you're stuck on the outside. It comes out of the 4 of Pentacles, where you kind of were conserving yourself and keeping yourself to yourself, and the result is that you are alone. The 5 of Diamonds, we are all going through this in a way where we're on the outside and we're shut out. And when we're considering it in terms of, what to get ready for in this situation, we all knew this was the reality already. We've been talking about it for the past 15 minutes anyway. So this is what I like to call sometimes a no-brainer card. It's just like, well, duh, that's what's happening. Thanks for that. But I asked a very simple question, so I got a very simple answer. And that's always something to consider. If you're asking simple questions, don't be upset when you get a very simple, straightforward, blunt answer that's like, it's not more complicated than that. There's not some secret twist that makes it easier, makes it different than how it is if you don't like it. This is how it is. Sometimes that's the message you take away from a tarot card reading when you get pulls like this. I think that we were ready to accept that. We spent some time really stewing there and being like, okay, that's what we're embracing and dealing with. That's what we're embracing and dealing with in this reading. Okay. In previous weeks, I have, held on to cards to draw at the end of the stream to finish and complete this reading. And I'm contemplating whether I should interpret these right now or if I should save them for a little later. If you have any opinion on the matter, drop it in the chat. I'll probably just go with that. I want to talk a little bit about when you encounter a challenging case where you're asked a question like, what will happen with something? Or something like, what should I do? And, they're not going to be satisfied if they're not given an answer that tells them what they should do. My focus in a tarot card reading all the time is to collaborate in, creating a roadmap for what you can do to achieve your ends. That could be really closely aligned to what you should do, or it may also be what you should do. And I have this aversion to the word should, And for someone that didn't, maybe that's the way that they'd phrase it, and they'd actually be thinking the right way for their tarot card reading. That's something for me to be aware of when I'm going into a tarot card reading and someone says, what should I do? I do have to mark a caveat that there are some traps that you can fall into with the question, what should I do? But, if you can sufficiently make sure that you're avoiding them, it can be a good question to help you get some direction. The traps about the what should I do question are that you're essentially usually relinquishing your free will when you're asking that kind of question. You are disempowering yourself by saying, I give up trying to figure out what to do. I give up trying to decide what I want to do. It's almost like I give up having any control about the outcome at all. Just tell me what to do for whatever reason to serve anyone. And then it's like this question of, are you really serving yourself? And it's really dangerous to open yourself up where you could receive answers from places that didn't serve you. If you're asking in a way that leaves openings and holes and gaps in your intention that way. And that'll give you, all those little pitfalls, will come through in your reading. So that's a little caveat I'd like to cover when I hear the question, what should I do? Is I then immediately kind of take a step back and, I go into my little spiel about not liking determinism and believing in free will, and believing free will is the reason that determinism is incapable in my worldview, or incompatible with my worldview. And that, in terms of the practice I'm doing with tarot is to enable and empower your free will. And for that, we have to determine what direction you want to take your free will in. You have to decide what is it that serves you. And we can draw cards to kind of get a clearer perspective on the situation that may help you frame what you want to ask. But I don't want to just straight tell you what you should do in a reading. I'm not just dispensing directions. We're trying to develop insight and share wisdom. And that's really different. The wise people, the sages, don't just have people come up and tell them what to do. They usually drop some really poignant question that leaves them wondering and suddenly gets them thinking in a different way that gets them where they needed to go. That's the kind of moment that can come through a tarot card reading, that you're really after. Important to ask and listen. Ask and listen. Big part of doing a tarot card reading. I was talking a little bit earlier about how listening to ourselves is a bit of a different process. But if I was sitting there with someone in a reading and they were insistent on me having me tell them what they should do, I would phrase my answer as a very direct, this is what you should do if this is what you want to happen. Because if they're not going to choose a direction for the reading, I'm not going to give aimless advice because I don't think it's helpful or safe. I'm going to, kind of clarify some directions and just attack it from a number of angles that I can deduce may be helpful in broadening perspective and offering clarity to the situation as best I can, or hope that some of the questions and the directions I take it help provoke deeper and more clarified directions and get closer to discovering our intention and our will and what we want to achieve, what we want to do. Sometimes it's hard to discover that. Sometimes it's not clear. And sometimes it is. Those readings are, to me, fun and easy. You can dive right in, get to work right away. Just, skip ahead. I love doing readings with my fiance because we've done them so much now, and, she listens to me talk about this every week, so she asks very good questions. Every time it's just like, that is a perfect question, and we can dive right into interpretation because you know how to do this. And that, I think, is a really important part of the practice. That's my big message today, is getting the right question is how you get the good reading. And it's really important to know what you're looking for. All right, so those are the pitfalls to should, right? Now let's talk about the what will happen question that you can encounter in reading. And I want to address it because there are many times that I have met people in a reading that have this question, what should I do, or what will happen? And they're very insistent that I give them a direct answer to it. Regardless of how many times I try to circumvent it and redirect and, just offer my perspective and my reasoning, there are many times that there would just be insistence. And, so then it's a tricky position for me to decide what it is I want to offer that person in that moment. And sometimes I'll just, say, put up front right away that, well, if I had to guess, I would guess blank, A, B, whichever, and just be clear that that's all I'm doing is guessing. That's all we're doing in that moment is guessing. And is that helping you? Is that really helping you? And what is it you need help with? Is a really great question. What are you worried about? And it's a tough question. It's a pretty ambiguous question. What do you need? What do you want from a tarot card reading? So it's one that you usually need to help people with. And I think that, there's different angles you could come at it that might make it easier for people to get into it. If it's just a, hey, how are you? What's going on? What areas of life did you want to try and discuss today? What are some of your life goals right now? Let's, take a life coaching perspective. What are you can, approach it from a handful of different angles with different people to bring forward some of the premises for intention that you need to set for a reading. So we're here with the election, and we're kind of, biding our time, hoping for Biden. And with this mindset, I really want to soothe anxiety, to find calm and peace, to find strength and courage, to be ready for whatever happens with this election. I want us to be strong and peaceful and confident in the time leading up to knowing and after. I want us to, be ready and poised to take whatever action we can or that we need when the opportunity does present itself. That's some of the intention that I have for us, for this card, for our mindset. I'm loving this card. Here comes a Queen of Cups, Queen of Hearts in my playing card deck. Reading with playing cards is very fun. It's called Cartomancy, which I think sounds very cool. The playing card deck was derived from the tarot deck, so it works just fine. It's you lose some cards though. Playing card deck has just the Joker instead of the entire trump suit, the Major Arcana. Where are you, my Queen of Cups? You also lose a court card. The tarot deck has pages and knights. The playing card deck just has those jacks. That's it. But it more or less works out. In any case, the Queen of Cups here for our mindset. Wow, it was really the last card. I went through the entire deck. Great. That's okay. I'm going to wholeheartedly believe that it just made the timing of this message a little better that we took some time to wait for this card. The Queen of Cups is definitely she's a character that knows how to love herself, which is, I think, an important feature aspect of it right here. And also to be loving to other people and to be able to react compassionately to whatever they're presented with from other people. The Queen of Cups is going to be, not trampled, she's not going to, give up space for her own feelings, but she's also going to be looking out for others. And really that, looking out for others, actively listening, our Queen of Cups. Definitely actively tuned in empathically to how people are feeling, and trying to address that. And that's a mindset. A mindset for peace of mind. Because honestly, if I see now with the Queen of Cups, if you do love yourself, you wouldn't want to do unto yourself all of this undue and unnecessary worry. You wouldn't. Be kinder to yourself than that, and, be the voice that says, it's going to be okay, we're going to do what we can, there's nothing to do now, and we're going to keep going on one way or another, it's going to be okay, we'll make it. And that just offering yourself that kind of comfort is what I see in the Queen of Cups. I'd also say this is the mindset of finding those people that introduce that energy and that character into your life, should you be lucky enough to have a Queen of Cups close to you. Might be a very nice one to invite into your space a little bit. Get some time with them to help soothe anxiety and move you into a more peaceful state. Thank you to all the Queens of Cups out there. All of you that are making yourself available to listen, be compassionate, be empathic, and hold each other up through this anxious time. Needed to give myself a moment for that to sink in. Said before on the shuffle, that's an important thing to do with readings. Pacing is very important, especially when you're delivering difficult to stomach truths. In this case, I found the message from the Queen of Cups very comforting and very warm to embrace, so it didn't feel hard, or challenging to deliver. So I didn't mind ruminating with it for a while. But if we were getting into sort of an honesty with knives kind of scenario, where we're breaking some hard truths that with them are going to bring up some challenging feelings, pacing that is really important because we don't want to come at a pace that just overwhelms and cripples the person that we're trying to offer this, direction to. Hi, Milan. Glad that you made it. I'll have to do a recap of this whole reading for people that didn't catch the beginning of it. I'll do that after I finish it. Well, Milan, your entrance just threw me off my train of thought and I lost it. And if I lost it, probably wasn't as important as getting refocused on this card. Because we're going to talk about what we can do in a situation that we've already illustrated is one where we're kind of without much to do in terms of the election at this point. It's all going down outside of us, outside of our control, and we already put in our vote. Now it plays itself out and we need it on the other end. And this is the moment, this is the time where we're shut out from it, where we're the paupers outside the church and the Five of Pentacles, we're shut out. We don't get to be a part of the process any more than we already have been. This is it. We, of course, drew these cards with the intention for them to guide us to anxiety soothing. This card, this Five of Pentacles, is an example of a message that's more challenging. That I was saying earlier, you would need to give some time to process those challenging feelings that come up and measure your pacing in a tarot card reading, so that you're not just, wounding someone. Because if you're really hurting someone, it's a fine line. Because I'd say there's sometimes in a tarot reading where I perform something akin to emotional surgery, where I can really go in deep and pull up, this one troubled seed buried in here, address it, present it, pull it up, bring forward its experience, cut it out, and release it. But that's an exhausting process to go through. in terms of receiving a reading, especially if it goes deep. It can go very deep, cut very deep. So, it's not like we have an anesthetic here for the emotional surgery, or rather, the anesthetic is making sure we're delivering some comforting messages or some time to process, as we move through it. And that is really important for, I think, the message to be more comfortably and more effectively received. So here we are, worrying about the election. Not much to do about it. And we looked for what mindset would help us really soothe ourselves and find more peace of mind. And the answer was simply to have compassion and love for ourselves the same way we do for other people, and to find those people that are compassionate and empathic and invite them into our space and into our time and into our lives. So now that I've illustrated a little bit of that and that there's not much to do, I'm going to ask the question, what do I do to really move forward and put in place my peacefulness and whatever sets me up to be ready for what comes? And if there's some magical butterfly effect that puts Biden in office, let me do it. Tell me what it is now. That's our card. The Four of Diamonds. I was even going to say earlier when I drew the 5, I was like, the Four of Diamonds would illustrate this fairly well also. I'd interpret it about the same way. And I've drawn it for the card that says, what do we do? Because I asked the same question, so I got the same answer. That's so here's an example of where I really wanted to do a ready, set, go. And I laid 3 cards, and 2 of them addressed something that I already knew. So maybe I could have done this as just a 1-card reading or a 2-card reading if I really needed to address it with cards just to feel good that it was on the table and addressed. I really didn't need this 4 of Pentacles. That says the action to take is to conserve yourself, keep to yourself, bide your time, wait, just recharge time. That's what you do. Feeling anxious, time to have some just recharge time. Just chill out and not expend myself. I'm not trying to give myself away energetically or my time or my energy to anyone or anything. I'm just trying to keep to myself. That's the action directed by the 4 of Pentacles for us to find our peace of mind, to really find some calm from anxiety we may be feeling about this election and current events. What a year. What a year, 2020. You've been rough to us. Been a little bit. Giving me really good reason to draw cards. Whew. Thank you, Tarot. You've been a fantastic companion through all of it. That's a fairly straightforward reading, reflecting on the advice that came off of those cards in terms of how to handle our anxiety right now together, I'd feel would apply pretty well just in general to kind of handle anxiety. So maybe it might be a useful message to any of us that more chronically experience anxiety, or whenever we do end up experiencing anxiety in our lives, because let's face it, we're going to at some point. Our way to approach it sometimes when it's a situation that has elements we can't control is to accept that, not exert ourselves in any way to try and change it, and be loving to ourselves and forgiving to ourselves, compassionate for ourselves, and, not torture ourselves with the thoughts that we're having. Know that it's okay to be worried about these things, and you're not, making a blunder, you're not doing something wrong. You're really doing all you can by doing nothing. That's sometimes a heavy truth. Some of us are wired to want to be so active, be so airy, so swordsy about things, to just, be doing something. So in a time where we're called for a much more pentacly no action or relaxed and recessed and contained action, can be a more uncomfortable place. As it turns out, for me, I'm pretty earthy, characteristics of my own. I love being patient. I love problems that I can fix by just waiting and doing nothing. It's my favorite way to solve problems. So for me, this kind of a reading is, all right, sure, I'm down. Maybe I'll have some hiccups on the Queen of Cups because, you're asking me to love myself, and we all have self-esteem issues, so I don't know about that, man. That's But this looks pretty good to me, I can handle that. Just taking it easy. We're doing the shuffle. Thanks for being here. I see in the chat a little bit ago, Stathis, you suggested one of the things we can do to relieve anxiety is bubble bath. Solid answer. Solid answer. Didn't need cards, mysticism, or any of that for that answer. Just straight up think about it. Bubble bath. Like, who's kidding? That's gonna be it. There's probably a bunch of these listicles of ways to relieve anxiety, and I'm sure that's on it. Thanks everyone for joining me and considering this reading, because I know this was something that I wanted to address for myself too, which is why I presented it for the stream today. But I really hope that it was helpful for some of you to join in this conversation about it. So we take that away. Clean up those cards. And a lot of times there are subtleties and nuances and unique characteristics to the ways that we process and navigate our own experience of a shared circumstance, So even after that reading, I would sit with any one of you in this group and do an individual reading for, your own approach to handling the circumstance of the election or whatever else is alongside it in your life. And I think that a tarot reading can bring out really interesting personalized messages and really interesting personalized ways to hear and understand the message that really make it digestible and comprehensible. Is one of the stronger features I see coming from a tarot reading. So I really think, doing these group format readings is fun, but it meant that it directed our reading to something that spoke more generally about how anxiety just works in general, because that was the common link that we could meet on, When we get into a narrower scope, in terms of how many people we're addressing, it's just you, or it's just a reading about you and one other person, where the scope is narrowed, the message is more individualized. And I think when more individualized, it's much more potent. I've talked a lot about scope, and that's one of the important things to consider in framing a question for tarot, and I'm surprised I got this far without mentioning it, focused on other things so much. Having a really wide scope in terms of like looking at, what should I be doing with my life, or what's, the challenges that I face in the next year, what's when we get to these really wide lengths of time, or these large several areas of our life considered at once, when we're considering that much, I need a reading that has more cards because I've got a lot to cover. B, probably a spread layout that I've concocted, or I'm using like a Celtic cross or something. B, I want to narrow the scope as much as we can, because that will produce a clearer and more direct reading. Because when you ask ambiguous questions, of course you get ambiguous answers. Anywhere that I can draw some certainty out of a very ambiguous question, or a question that refers to several different aspects of our life, or a scenario, or a very long time frame. These are the moments that I'm like, let's pare this down. What are we really talking about here? Or is it all something you need to consider? And now we're just going to have a conversation in general about that before maybe that one branching into some of the pared down, narrower scope questions that emerged from the conversation that needed to start from, I've got it all in my head this way, and I just need to know what to do with this big picture. And then we start breaking it into its parts. That's how I might approach a reading with someone that presented me a question with too large a scope. In terms of how wide or narrow to make a scope for a tarot reading, I think it's important to consider that against what your intention is about what you're trying to achieve. What sort of time frame do you expect or want this to happen in? If I'm doing like the reading we did just a moment ago, my intention on the time frame for that was like I addressed the time leading up to knowing election results, and sometime immediately after, how we proceed from there. But that's it, I'm addressing like a handful of weeks. And that's like, I think, a pretty decent scope, because even that brought us to a pretty general place. Of course, we were also talking about a small group of people, which widened our scope even more. So, narrowing it is tricky. But I really think one of the easiest ways to narrow your scope is to really focus it on the present moment as much as you can. And any references to the past or the future are better made as their direct relationship to the present moment, viewing them from the present moment. What direction is this going versus what happens in the future? What direction can I veer it in? Or if I want to veer it a certain direction, how do I do that? Rather than, what will happen, and if I'm trying to veer a certain direction and achieve a certain goal, is there a time frame with which I need to or want to accomplish it? And that can be part of our intention. And the action required of you to accomplish something in a week versus a month versus a year may be a very different answer. And your answer to doing it in a week may make it obvious to you that it's simply not feasible or possible. And at that point, you might rethink and open it up a little. What if I'm trying to do it for a month? Can I try that? It's a lot of times, I've talked about a lot, having the freedom and the flexibility to really pivot to other questions with the reading as they arise from the conversation that comes forth from the cards you're drawing. The cards are going to direct the conversation. That's why we're inviting them into the conversation, is to structure and direct, the conversation. So follow them. Do follow them. When the cards introduce curious questions and things that we're left wondering and that we're uncertain about, that's a wonderful rabbit hole to follow, because we've just discovered some deeper mystery. We've answered a question up here and it only brought more questions, so we can dive deeper. And then when we arrive there, it could be somewhere interesting, or, open up more questions. And that's a really fun process to me, and that's how I really approach doing a tarot reading, more as a very flexible and dynamic conversation, which is how I prefer. I think I spoke a little bit. Hi, Angie. See you in the chat. Thank you for being here. I think I addressed earlier on the shuffle when I was talking about intention setting how, lost my train of thought again. Every time someone comes in, I'm like, oh man, and I'm thinking about that person, and I'm excited, vibing, and I'm in that energy, and then I'm just like, what was I talking about again? I was talking about intention setting in regards to, what was it? Fire it at me in the chat if you can, because you'll help us stay on the rails. Or better yet, take us where you want us to go, because I'm always inviting those questions. Right. When I'm getting the scope narrowed down for someone. Yes, following the conversation. I got it. I like to do readings as more of an adaptive conversation. Though there are many people that prefer what I would describe as two other styles of reading that I see as distinctly different from the dynamic give and take conversation. And it depends on the other person I'm doing a reading with, which style of these readings we're going to fall into. One is this someone who just likes to talk a lot, and they kind of think aloud, and develop their thoughts aloud. In that kind of a reading, I'm going to be very quiet. I'm probably going to just sneak a couple questions in edgewise that guide the monologue and the exploratory discourse that they're providing, and help navigate us to the deeper truths we're trying to bring forward with the cards. And that's an interesting kind of reading, because I'm saying very little in those readings. And when we arrive at the end, it's kind of surprising how, I think a lot of what's revealed in a reading is how the power was within us to kind of overcome whatever emotional obstacle we were looking at, or to better understand our situation. The power was really within us. And it's easier, I think, to discover it sometimes through a tarot card reading. It can be a beautiful tool. In these cases where I'm doing a reading with someone who just develops their thoughts by thinking aloud, I'm just asking a couple questions, adding a couple comments, making sure I'm addressing things that need to be addressed. If there's something I need to redirect or clarify or restate a little bit, Just make sure that we're crafting the right discourse across the way. If you say something, self-defeating that's out of place and out of character and doesn't serve you, I might call that out real quick and say, hey, don't say that, you know better. And you're like, you're right. And then they move on and keep going, but just little contributions like that, little sideways comments that fold into the narrative and dialogue that person who is a big time speaker and just wants to talk is going to help provide. That's one style of reading that I feel is a little different than the more adaptive conversation, where you're presenting ideas, I'm presenting ideas back, and we're going back and forth to formulate the intention for this card and starting to move out from there. I said there was 3. There's this other type where you're with someone who is a listener, just a big time listener. This is the other type, side of this spectrum. This is someone who will speak very little and wants to speak very little, if at all. It's more comfortable. There are a lot of people who are wired just to be patient observers, and they're very good at it. Very good at being quiet and listening, receiving, and taking it in. I really enjoy doing readings with these people, well, in part because I consider myself sometimes a quiet person and I admire quiet people. That's me. But I like these kinds of readings because those people are usually ready to sit down and hear what the reading has to tell them. And in this reading, I do a lot of the talking. And I'll guide the reading and make sure that it's following a direction that they want by really closely listening to them. We're going to need to understand a lot from the subtle cues of their body language and, prompt questions that offer simple answers to help direct us on our way to formulating a good question. But I'm going to provide a lot of the discourse. I'm going to explain, how I'm going to use tarot and how I think it would be effective to use it for the situation that you've brought forward. And even if it's something that you were just didn't want to talk about, explicitly, we've done this before in readings like we did with Tim earlier on the shuffle. You don't want to state it aloud. As you say, it's about career. I have in mind a certain thing I want it to be about. And I know what I want to do, and I'm like, do you know what you want to do with it? And as long as they can say yes, then I'm like, that's our intention and we can go forward, and they just want to listen to the message that comes off the cards. They don't need to say anything to me. As part of the process in crafting or receiving that message. So those readings are very fun to me. You definitely have to do a lot more work in that kind of reading to make sure you're listening and that you're inviting space for a listener to contribute their thoughts when you need them to really, choose the direction and course for the reading, or to make sure that you're, following their emotional experience as we, traverse the subjects that are coming up in the reading. Readings with listeners take a lot more listening. You got to push and make yourself listen more. Readings with people that talk, you got to push and make sure that you're still getting some things in edgewise. But again, make space for them to talk. And the listening one, make space for them to listen. Provide space for them to just listen. And and all the varying shades of gray in between. Of, being a full 50-50 conversation to, you listen a little more, but you know what I mean. Hi, Marvin, I see you in the chat. Would you here for support? That is okay. I was just talking earlier when we did a reading to talk about how we all collectively can handle our difficult, challenging feelings and especially anxiety over this election. One of the things I mentioned was invite the Queen of Cups into your life from yourself and from anyone who provides it. This Queen of Cups who is a compassionate, empathic, loving person who will make themselves available to hold and heal and love and cherish someone who is wounded or someone who is hurting. Provide that to yourself, provide that to others, receive it from others. Marvin, you are this Queen of Cups to me. You are one of the sweetest people I know. Of course you're here for support. And you are exactly the kind of person I was just saying, make sure you're, inviting this. That's healing. That's soothing. You're the medicine we need, Marvin. Maybe I should say you're the medicine I need, since I was, saying make sure you reach out to those Queens of Cups in your life. There's my takeaway. I recognize it's getting a little late, but if anyone has any questions, I would love to dive into those. And with even more excitement, I state, of course, that if you'd like to call in for a reading, for anything, it doesn't have to be about the election. Anything you'd like to do a reading about, we can go ahead and do that on stream together. And that's fun because, you get free tarot reading. It's pretty nice, And I love getting to do them. It's very fun doing them in the live format. Over the many years I've practiced tarot, I've practiced since I was about maybe 6 or 7. Mid-20 something amount of years that I've practiced tarot. I've done readings in public spaces pretty often, or it's come up at least. Not necessarily often, but it's come up. This has happened. So doing readings here on stream doesn't feel necessarily unfamiliar to me, to be doing a reading with a lot of people observing. And the process of doing a reading is very different in that setting. It's framed and delivered differently because you're receiving it in front of a group of other people. And I am careful that my intention includes the consideration that with these other people watching, the messages we reveal are still ones that we are ready to receive in that setting, and that'll be healthy and helpful and healing. And that does narrow, when we invite other people into the space, it kind of narrows the scope of what might come up in that reading, or changes it a little and introduces some new elements that might not have come up in a reading without those exact people in the room. Different presences will need a slightly different message to respond to arrive in the same place. And the magical little bit that we pull off with tarot is finding that right way to frame a message for that time and place and that person, and those people. So if anyone would like to call in, we can do it on Zoom. You call in on Zoom, get featured on stream, and that's the lot of it. But if no one wants to call in, I will go ahead, sign us off, and I kind of gave us the reading on the way there, but I would like to draw us one more card, because how could I close out the stream without drawing us one more card? That's how I've finished it every other time. If someone wants to put in the chat 1, 2, or 3 for me, I'll decide which of these stacks to choose from. One's going to be my blue, 3 is the black on the other side. Then we'll draw one more card. I'm not exactly sure what I want the intention of this card to be. I haven't decided yet, so if anyone has a idea for that, go ahead. The answer is 3. Nico first to the race. Thanks, Nico. We'll draw from this section of the deck. I'm going to do a weave, my favorite kind of shuffle that I've kind of talked about a little bit, where I grab 2 cards at a time and stack them very intentionally in this very specific order. I like doing this because when I do, as I get to the very end of the weave, I end up pulling 1 or 2 cards out, and that's my draw. I know I didn't pick one that was like biased, because the deck may cut with bias to some places. I know it wasn't stuck to another card. I separated them all one at a time as I drew it. That's a clean card right there. I'm going to make this card one of my favorite simple little cards to draw, which is the food for thought card. I love having food for thought because I love spending time lost in thought. So given my, fascination for that, it's what I'm going to offer you. Food for thought. When I draw a card for food for thought, it's like I want something that, asks that poignant question that a sage may offer, that gets you thinking and later on gives you that aha, oh man. So, receiving the food for thought up front here is kind of like a kind of moment, starts to get you thinking. So I want this card to be that unexpected that unexpected question that gives us direction. Let's see where we all meet. The Two of Pentacles. The question posed by the Two of Pentacles is, how can you take the utmost care in how you proceed with things? Two of Pentacles just depicts this place where there's someone balancing on a tightrope, kind of balancing the Two of Pentacles, and they're taking these little baby steps, one right after the other, heel to toe, just down the tightrope, because it's very calculated, very careful. Our Pentacles are careful and conservative. So the question that's posed to me by this card, to be food for thought, is how can we learn to be careful and take care with how we do things across the board? Just think about it and see what comes of it. I love food for thought. It's very fun. Have fun chewing on that one, everyone. I will see you all next week.